Happy Friday and welcome to another Relentless Learning. It is Friday, January 5th. It is the first Friday of the new year, 2024. I hope you all had a wonderful holidays. I hope you had a wonderful start to your new year. I'm excited to get back into it. Really briefly, I know a lot of you have been with us before, so you understand Relentless Learning and what we're trying to do. But I'm going to start off by reminding us of the purpose of Relentless Learning. And then I'm going to go into my big idea, and then in the green room, so to speak, I have Damon Poole. I'm very excited to speak with Damon on his big idea. So for those of you who have not seen this show before, what we do is every Friday at noon Pacific, I want to give back to the community. I want to present some big ideas, things that can help you, things that you can use in your business, hopefully immediately, different ways of looking at the world, because I think that's a really big thing. Those of you who've been here before understand that's one of my big themes is if we can see the world differently, there's a huge power in that. So today we have Damon Poole. As I said, he's going to be talking about Agile to talking about how we can benefit people while making far larger profits. I'm looking forward to seeing that. There's a lot in the Agile community these days about Agile, and there's, I don't want to say existential crisis, but we do know, those of you who are in the community, that there's been a lot of upheaval and things in 2023. It'd be interesting to see where we're headed in 2024. I'm going to present on something that is a metaphor that I've used in my training many times that I think is one of the more powerful metaphors that I use. And that metaphor is comparing your backlog to physical inventory. And I'll get to that in a moment. We have next week open. We have special guests every week. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, I had a guest lined up for the 12th, and that guest will not be able to make it. So I have an open date for the 12th. I've invited a lot of folks who are friends and acquaintances from my past, people who I have a lot of respect for. If you have a big idea, please fill out the form. Come join us next week, since that date is open. This Relentless Learning is sponsored by something called the VUCA MBA. What is the VUCA MBA? Well, it's a class that I teach, actually, but it is an acronym. Both of them are acronyms. And VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It comes to us from the military, actually, when they were trying to describe the world and how the world has changed. And I think we all realize that the world is changing. We all realize that the world is becoming more volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And there's a whole bunch of alphabet soup of other acronyms that people are using these days. In fact, it's a cottage industry to come up with new acronyms, I guess. When you're a consultant, you have to have something new. The MBA is, you're going to take this class, you're not going to get a master's in business, but the MBA stands for Mindset for Business Agility. It's kind of a play on words. It's something that hopefully is memorable for people, but we're going to help you to see, or I'm going to help you to see the world differently. And I think by seeing the world differently, it's going to unlock a lot of things in your life. So that's the VUCA MBA. I want to plug a special event that's coming up. This is on January 18th. I didn't put the date in there. I had to fire my PR person here who put this slide together. I'm going to give a seminar, a free seminar on called Mastering Swift Delivery for Maximum Impact. It's basically talking about my most recent book, Apke's Golden Rule of Agile, where I talk about the golden rule of Agile being delivering the optimal value in the shortest possible time. And I'm going to show you how to operationalize that. I'm going to show you how to provide relative value and effort to your backlog and sequence the work so that you can mathematically deliver the most value over the shortest amount of time. And it's very, very powerful. And it's something I've done this with all the companies. I do this in my training, thousands and thousands of people. This is one of the most impactful things that we can do. There's some helpful links and other links. All this stuff I put into the comments, by the way, and if you want to interact with Damon and myself, you can certainly put things in the comments, and we will respond to them after we get through our presentations. We'll have about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. If you, like I said, if you've seen this before, nothing new. Good, I'm looking at time. 5 minutes for the sponsorship and getting things set. I want to get into and segue into what I'm going to call my big idea for this particular Relentless Learning. So that big idea is, I've talked about before, and I just want to kind of put this into some kind of perspective for folks. I believe that metaphors, and I don't know if it's the word metaphors. I was an English major. I should know whether it's metaphors or something. Similes, analogies, these things are really important in our lives as human beings, especially when we're learning new things, because these are our bridge where we can start to see the world differently. Because what similes, analogies, metaphors, these things do for us is they take something that we know and we map it to something that we don't know. Or they take something that we can see and it maps us to something else that we cannot see. And it helps provide that bridge. So I'm really big on metaphors. In fact, I've mentioned a few times in this show that if I come out with my next book, it's probably going to be on Agile metaphors. So I hope somebody doesn't steal it out from under me. But I think it's very, very powerful to use metaphors. And one of the more powerful metaphors I've used in my training is talking about backlog management. I think backlog management is really important. This is Apke's golden rule of Agile. This is about sequencing the work so that we can deliver the most value in the shortest amount of time, about relative estimation versus absolute estimation, how we can leverage those things. But when you look at your backlog as a whole, when I'm working with product owners, one of the things I tell them, and they seem to really, really get it after I use this metaphor, is imagine that you own a small bodega. And for those of you who might not be city dwellers, it's a corner store or market. So, if you've watched Seinfeld, you probably know bodega. You got a small little market on the corner in a corner in San Francisco, which is just up the road from me. And I want you to imagine that you own that. And then I want you to think about, as a small business owner, when do you make money? And the answer when I talk with people is obviously pretty simple. I make money when I sell something. I make money when my inventory is taken off the shelf, brought to the counter, paid for, and out the door. And what I want to start asking another question is then, therefore, what is the value of the inventory that sits on the shelf? And the answer to that is, in my mind, there really isn't a whole lot of value to the inventory on the shelf. And as I was going to put this together, I asked a few questions of our good friend Google, and I wanted to find out what Google has to say about the value of inventory, because it's been a long time since I've done my accounting work. And this is what they came up with. I don't know if you all can read it, but I'll read it to you. Inventory is almost always an asset for accounting purpose. But the reason that inventory is listed as an asset for inventory purposes is in the next section that it's closely correlated to demand, if it is. And so inventory usually sells quickly after being produced, and therefore it makes it an asset. Meaning to me that it's only really an asset because I am expecting to deliver it quickly. I'm expecting it to sell quickly, so I'm already classifying it from an accounting standpoint as an asset. However, inventory that is left unsold may become a liability if the cost of storage is higher, if the inventory deteriorates and becomes unsellable. Now, when we take this metaphor and we apply it to something like our backlog, let's assume software development for the sake of argument, because that's where I spent most of my life. You all are smart people. You're here. If you weren't smart people, I don't think you'd be here anyway. You're smart people. If you're not in software development, you're going to be able to take it and use it in your thing. What happens when we look at the things that are on our backlog for software development? Our product owner, the product owner owns a backlog, and they put together, here's all the things that we can do for our software, all the features we can do, all the technical debt we can fix, all the defects we can fix, etc. We put all those things together, and that backlog, really, to me, when I look at it, that's inventory. And I say, what if we just think about that like we would physical inventory? What if we thought about that backlog like the person who owns a bodega thinks about the backlog? How would we start to treat our backlog differently? And I think that becomes very, very powerful when we start thinking about it. So what is this backlog that I'm talking about? It's an inventory in the sense of it's an inventory of ideas, because in software development, most knowledge work, these are ideas. These are not physical objects, right? So this is where we have to kind of imagine the metaphor. And I think we can all do that. We can all start to see that these things have, everything in my backlog of ideas has value. If I were to deliver this backlog item or this backlog item or a different backlog item, it's going to give me some kind of variable value in getting it to my customers or putting it into production. Or even if I'm doing DevOps, creating a better pipeline so I can move more things down the highway, another metaphor. And everything that I have in inventory has a cost. In accounting, I know we call this cost of sales, but in our business, it's how much does it take and how much do I have to spend to extract that value? And software development and most knowledge work, it's the amount of effort that we have to put into it, because, you know, if you look at the main cost of software development and a lot of other knowledge work, it's the pay that we pay to our developers, the people creating the work. So if we ask ourselves those questions and look at it at inventory, then we can start to ask the questions of, well, how much money do I have sitting in inventory? What is the value of moving things from one backlog to another backlog, right? The metaphor of, and this is what happens in a lot of companies where they have silos. We talk about all the time, and Agile, a lot of Agile talks about, let's create cross-functional teams. Well, if we start looking at backlog like inventory, we can watch the goods moving through the system. And I can tell you, just like in the bodega, if you're moving your product from one shelf to another, there's no value in it. You can move your inventory from one place to another in that bodega all day long, but you're not going to make money until you actually sell the item, until somebody picks it off the shelf and buys it. And it's the same with our intellectual inventory or ideas. There is not value in those ideas. Well, there is value in those ideas, but it's not realized value until it's actually put into production, until it's actually delivered. And then we can start to watch the inventory as it moves through the system and ask ourselves certain questions like we would physical inventory. How much inventory do we have in stock? Because in the bodega, the key to the bodega is they're small. They don't have a lot of room. They don't want to carry a bunch of inventory. In fact, their ideal situation would be that the stuff comes into the back door. I'm assuming it's a back door, and it's put on the shelf, and then 5 minutes later, it's gone. If they could sell everything without holding any inventory at all, that would be great. So they're going to look at their inventory and they say, you know, how long does my inventory stay on the shelf? And how long does it do it in knowledge work? Well, if I'm taking something and I'm moving it from the software development team to the testing team to another team that does, you know, something else, to a DevOps team, to a release team, to that team, all that inventory is stuck in the system. It's still sitting on a shelf somewhere. So anyway, I get real passionate about it because there's so many things that you can take this metaphor and you can start to look at it and you can start to play with it. Because the more you play with it, the more you realize, hey, there are some problems in our system, and we have a lot of value locked in our system, which is why again, going to go back to this seminar I'm going to give on, I believe it's January 18th. The link is in the comments so you can follow it and join us. It's free. I'm going to talk about this. How do we provide value to intellectual ideas? How do we provide value to an inventory of ideas? And how do we see how much value is locked into our system? There is no value to the bodega on keeping things on the shelf. There's no value in the bodega of inventorying items. That's another thing we do a lot of. When you have a lot of stuff in inventory, what do you have to do? You have to status it. Status reports, everybody knows who knows liens, that's muda, that's waste. There's no value added to statusing. It's like the bodega owner going out and doing inventory. I have to do it because every once in a while I got to verify what I have in inventory. But if it's sold, I don't have to inventory it. So there's a lot of waste in all this stuff that we're doing, because basically when you go into a status meeting of a backlog or a big project meeting and you're showing where all the work is, all you're really doing is saying, which shelf is it on now? Anyway, I'm looking at my time. I'm going to run out shortly. And I certainly want to bring in our special guest this week, Damon Poole. Hey, Damon. Damon, I don't recall if we have met. I think maybe in my past that we've crossed somewhere, but if we haven't, I know you from LinkedIn, as I do a lot of people. I'm pretty active on there, and I've seen you and things that you've posted and have a lot of respect for you. Really briefly, I just want to talk about Damon and his background, and then we'll get into some other things as well as his big idea. Damon's been an Agilist for 18 years. It's quite a bit of time. He's an enterprise Agile coach and co-author of Professional Coaching for Agilists. I put a link to that book in the comments so you folks can follow it. Be a good idea to take a look. In addition, he offers IC Agile, ICF accreditation coach training programs. He's coached and trained thousands of people at companies such as Capital One, Oanda, Ford, Perforce, and Fidelity. As a coach of coaches at Iliasen, if I pronounced it right, Damon led the Agile delivery team, which grew to hundreds of Agile coaches and other Agilists in the field. He's International Coaching Federation Associated Certified Coach. He's got a whole bunch of other certifications. He is a staple at conferences and gives talks and all kinds of things, very active in the Agile community. Anyway, did I miss anything, Damon?
Snowboarder, rollerblader, father.
Yeah. Real quick question on the snowboarding, because I had a friend of mine. We were at breakfast this morning, and he's complaining he's got a trip to Utah and there's no snow. You guys have problems with snow this year as far as snowboarding? It seems like it's a pretty warm winter.
It's horrible. I'm on the East Coast, and there's a storm coming on Sunday, so I'm hoping to go on Monday actually, but also going to Utah a week from now, and Snowbird has the most snow as far as we can see. That's where we're going.
Okay. Well, we're doing pretty good here in the Sierras in California, because I just saw that there's a snow advisory. So don't drive there unless you absolutely have to. Anyway, Damon, we're going to get to your big idea in a second, which is talking about, talking a little bit less about Agile and just talking about how we can help people and make money, which is kind of a fun thing. I like help people. I certainly like making money. Are there any other things that you have to promote, or things that you're interested in these days?
Well, I think as far as promoting, there's probably three things. The book, as you mentioned, Professional Coaching for Agilists. One of the things about Agile is that if it was a simple thing, we'd all be doing it. We would have all been doing it many years ago, and we wouldn't be even talking about Agile. It would just be the natural way of the world. Coaching helps to accelerate that process of people going Agile. So definitely recommend that book. The second thing is I have courses from IC Agile, the ICP ATF, the ICP ACC, and I also have two courses for professional coaching. One is accredited through the International Coaching Federation, and the other is undergoing accreditation. But in any case, there's that. And then finally, of course, I'm available to help out part-time. So those would be the sort of the three areas I would mention.
Well, super. And as you said, you got listed on your thing, Boston and Toronto. Talk about that, splitting time or?
Well, my partner is a Canadian, so I spend a fair amount of time in Canada.
Okay. All right. Good enough. So real briefly, I'm going to give you some time to present your big idea. I want to remind folks, while Damon is presenting his big idea, you have the comment section that you all can comment on. And what we will do after the presentations, Andy, actually, I see a comment from Andy we'll get to briefly after the presentation. You can put them in there and we'll discuss them. If not, we're going to talk anyway, because I'm very interested in what Damon has to say. But I certainly would love for our audience to make sure if there's some things that they have questions about, that they can post them, and we'll certainly, Damon and I will respond to them after his presentation. So without further ado, Damon, I'm going to get out of the way, and I'm going to give you the stage and let you take over, and I'll see you in about 10 minutes or so.
Okay, great. Well, I think this will go pretty quickly, because I actually prefer discussion. So I'll try to get the big idea out there as quickly as I can, and then we can have the discussion. As I was listening to you talk, Larry, I noted the part about inventory, which is actually a big part of what I'm going to talk about. I wasn't going to use the word inventory, but I will now, because it relates very much to what you're already saying. So I do have a few slides. Let me see how that goes. All right, so share screen. And all right, here we go. All right, so hopefully you're seeing my PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, Damon, I just for whatever reason we might be having some problems. We don't see it currently.
Okay.
If you put on.
There's another thing that came up. Okay, so
Okay.
window. There we go. How's that?
Yeah, and I'm going to add it to the stage and get the heck out of the way.
Okay, great. So I want to start with the question, why Agile? And there are so many answers to this. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with any answers. We all have a different way of looking at this, but I think from my perspective, to just totally boil it down and simplify it, it comes down to just two things: people and profits. People, why are people so important? Well, if you look at the Agile Manifesto, it says something like, I haven't got it exactly memorized, but give people the environment and support they need and trust them to get the job done. It turns out that doing that, getting out of people's way, the status that Larry was talking about earlier, asking them, how's it going? How's it going? Is it done? Is it done? Is it done? Are we there? Are we there? Are we there? Is actually just a waste of everybody's time. We should be working in an environment where we don't need to ask that. And those status questions, how are we doing, are kind of showing lack of trust as well. We wouldn't need that if people said, we're going to get this done. We're going to work on this. We're going to get this done. And then we regularly got it done. We would be like, oh, you said that date? Okay, great. We're all set. And there's all kinds of reasons why that could be an issue, but that's the people side. And really, if you think about it, you've either hired amazing, valuable, competent people, or you haven't. And if you haven't, go work on that. But if you have, give them what they need and let them be their most valuable self. I think we can all relate to working for somebody that was saying, oh, I need you to work on this thing. I need you to get it done by this date. I need you to do it this way. And nope, it's going to be this way. And that we're actually the expert in that area. We're the one with the experience and the knowledge, and they're not letting us hit our full potential, right? Every single person in an organization should be empowered so that you can get the most value out of them. Otherwise, you're only getting the kind of value you're getting out of those folks is whatever value that their manager would do if they were doing it, but you're not going to do it as well as your manager would do it the way that they would do it. You're going to do it best the way that you would do it, right? So we want to empower people. That's where you're going to get the most value out of it, and that's great for the organization, right? So if you're valuable, I'm valuable, the organization's going to get more out of us. We're going to have a better organization. So therefore you're going to get benefit and I'm going to get benefit. So it's not just me and you. It's not just the organization. It's everybody. So we want to fully empower everybody to get that out. The other thing about it is, work is a 4-letter word. But when I go to work, I want to enjoy myself. I want to do work that's fulfilling, that I feel like at the end of the day, oh, it's the end of the day. Well, this was a really good day, and I feel like I really accomplished something, and I accomplished it with wonderful people. I feel valued and appreciated, right? I want you to think about how often that happens really in the real world, right? The other one is profits. And when I talk about profits, sometimes people are like, "Ooh, that's kind of cringeworthy. Oh, you're all about the money." I'm not all about the money. I'm sure you're not all about the money. But if I said, you know what, you should take a lower pay and be happy in a tiny little apartment, and you don't need any hobbies, you don't need Netflix, you don't need to go snowboarding, it's too expensive. You'd be like, hey, no, I want to do those things. And those things take money, right? So there's nothing wrong with money. Not that we're going to fixate on it, but money, profits is an easy way to look to see how are we doing. People are either coming to our bottega and they're buying our stuff, right? To use the metaphor that Larry was using about being a bottega owner in San Francisco. People come in, they look at your wares, they either go, nah, and they walk out, or they go, oh, that looks delicious. I'll bet it's fresh. I'll bet it hasn't been sitting in inventory for a week. I'll have one of those. So you can look at your profits to see, am I doing well? Not just, am I making money, but am I making more money than I'm spending? All right. So people and profits are the two ways that I think we can measure whether we're doing well with Agile. And hopefully that's the last mention I'm going to make of Agile, because personally, I don't think Agile is important. You know, the measure of agility is not the important thing. If you use agility to have satisfied people, fulfilled people, and increase your profits, awesome. But being agile is not the most important thing. It's definitely a great way to get there. So I want you to think about the team you're on with the best results ever across your entire life. Your entire life. At work, at home, your hobbies, friends, family, that you're, you know, a legitimate team member, individual contributor, and you went through the forming, storming, norming, and performing kind of thing. It wasn't just like a one-day basketball, you know, sort of pickup game. And however you would measure that success, it could be whales saved, charity dollars earned, profits, you know, whatever it is, team of the best results ever. This is a typical result of when I ask people to do this in training or as part of a workshop at a client, that these are the things that come up. There are other things that come up, but these are in the bullseye. And across running this hundreds of times with thousands of people at dozens and dozens of organizations, these are the things that always come up in the bullseye. The other stuff, you know, it just sort of falls off. So, and notice I said team of the best results ever. That's the important thing, the best results ever. These are the things that you want to do, encourage, and look for to see if you have a great team. And you might say, well, I can't tell people to laugh. That's not going to work. I can, hey, have fun, be humorous. No, you can't, but you can see if it's happening. And if it's not happening, I guarantee you, you do not have teams with the best results ever. People say, well, in the real world, we need to do these things. Are you saying you don't want to have the team with the best results ever? Because if you want to have the team with the best results ever, these are the things you need to focus on. And there's no way to argue with it. Or you say, oh, we have to do this for this reason. Really? So you want a mediocre team? No, but you know, studies have shown, think of the team you're on with the best results ever. Those, you know, micromanagement, did that show up on the team with the best results ever? Probably not. Unhappy people, did that show up on the team with the best results ever? Silos, did that show up on the team with the best results ever? No. So something to think about. If we focus on these things, we'll have happier, more fulfilled people, and the company will do better. Right? So this is the human side. I saw a thing on LinkedIn that coaches are all focused on mental therapy these days. So, wow. If this, focus on this is mental therapy, then by all means. But I think by sort of saying something like that, it's very diluting and takes away from the importance of these things, right? This is what Agile, oh, okay, there's the word. This is what Agile is all about. Creating great teams requires teams that have these things. So now I want to look at profits. And I've worked on this for quite a while, trying to think of how to describe this. This is a new slide. People talk about cycle time and lead time, and it's all very confusing. So I have something that's sort of in that area. I'm going to define something that I like to call extra time as the sole measure of whether or not you're doing well and are going to maximize your profits, right? So if you've got a bottega that has a product that nobody wants, it doesn't matter how quickly you create it. It doesn't matter how low your inventory is. Well, it's going to be pretty high if nobody buys it, right? You keep piling into the inventory. the product is important, but put that aside for a moment. Let's say you have something super valuable to provide. If you take a long time to provide it, it reduces its value, right? You're whatever value you could have gotten, you're going to get less of it, right? Another part of this is to look at inventory. If you have multiple projects in flight at the same time, they all have inventory in that same warehouse, right? So it's not just inventory on one thing, it's inventory on other things. And that inventory is overlapping, right? This project that's going slowly is actually slowing down that project because we're spreading the resources across the two projects. So anyway, so extra time. I want you to think about something in your organization that is discovered, and this happens on a regular basis, that the organization as a whole agrees, yes, that is the most valuable thing we could do. And maybe it's a year of effort to do it. If it was, start to finish, all hands on deck, a year of effort. I'll bet that in that year of effort, there's still something of about a month's size. And it doesn't matter what the size is. Some organizations, it could be 2 weeks, 1 week, whatever. But let's just go with 1 month. And as an organization, you go, wow, this is the best thing that we could be doing. This is going to have the most bang for the buck for us to do. And as soon as we can get it out there, great. And end to end, it's going to take a team, whatever the size is, 1 month, working on nothing else to get it done. From time of discovery or from time to start to it's done and it's out there and customers can use it, it's 1 month. It may not be the whole idea, but at least you're going to start getting value. So let's say it's 1 month. So you discover it, and it would take you a month, right? So let's see how this might actually play out. Traditionally, there's going to be a delay, right? So people say, hey, we're sprinting every 2 weeks. Yeah, but when did the content for that sprint first get thought of? When was it a glimmer in somebody's eye? It could be a year ago, 6 months ago, 3 months ago. It's amazing when you dive into the, how something got into the backlog, where it came from. It could have been a long time ago. Now, not everybody's like this, but many organizations, it takes a while between we've got this awesome thing that we've just discovered out in the marketplace or internally until somebody starts on it. The other thing is, okay, it is a high value item, but it's conflated with a bunch of other not as important but related work, right? It's in the same project, whatever. So there's this other stuff which is slowing it down. And so maybe it takes 6 months from we start till it's out there. This is traditional. There are not a lot of people working this way, but there are still some, but just for comparison. Another one is, okay, yes, we put together a team and we start to finish, get it done in a month, but it took a while to get through all the process to say, yes, let's do this. So there was still a delay. Another way that this can happen is we waterfall it via sprints. So there's a delay, maybe it's not so bad, but we do some ideation, we do some design, some concept work, some planning, blah, blah, blah. And eventually it gets out there. We're so quote unquote doing sprints, but really, let's face it, it is waterfall via sprints. And then the next to last one here is we get it done in the shortest period of time we could, but it's part of a larger effort. So still, it's taking a while. The best thing that we can do is, as soon as we discover that this is the highest value thing that we could do as an organization, we start immediately, right? And so the delay on that is actually 0. So a way to measure how agile your organization is to look at how much extra time is there between if you started the highest value item as soon as you discovered it until it was done, all hands on deck, how much time in addition to that does it actually take your organization? And you want to shrink that and shrink that and shrink that. It's not going to get down to 0 for everything. I just mean for the highest value thing. So if you can work that way, here's an example. I've just started getting back into this. I was looking at this, a long time ago, but 10 years ago, Agile was flying off the shelves. Not so much these days. So I'm getting back into it. I need a newer example, but This is still a pretty compelling example. I was working with an organization that was doing some contract work for American Express. They had this idea that they pitched to American Express. It got funded 4 quarters later, which is a year. They had their initial rollout 4 quarters later, full rollout 4 quarters after that. And the thing is, as soon as it rolled out, this is kind of an awesome example, because as soon as it rolled out, they started making money. It was all based on card swipes, and they got a fraction of a penny on every card swipe, but it was $250,000 a quarter. So if they had been working, and actually this is an old example, so it's not quite as extreme as what I was showing earlier, but in any case, if they only had a delay of 1 quarter, right, it took them, it was a larger, this was like 10 years ago, but it was a 1 quarter delay between idea and they started working on it, and 2 quarters, well, this is the original plan up here. And then it took them 1 quarter before they started, 2 quarters for the full rollout. It was all hands on deck. That meant that by switching to working this way, they gained an extra $2.25 million than if they had done it the way they were traditionally doing it. And this was not waterfall. Even though it was 10 years ago, they were sprinting. It's just they had the delay of funding, and between funding and the full rollout, they were doing a little bit of it and working on some other things. Other things are important too. But if they had focused on the most valuable thing and started on it right away, they would have made an extra $2.25 million. Looking at this now, I realize that this could have been shrunk even more. So need a new example. But that's the basic thing that I want to share with you is people and profits. Right? Focus on those things that help people become fulfilled, right? Enabling them to do the kinds of value that provide the kinds of value that they can provide uniquely, create that environment where they can do that. And then also using the word relentless, relentlessly focus on doing as few things as you possibly can and getting them out as soon as you possibly can. There is so much more money out there that organizations could be making, way beyond what they're doing today. And I think if we focus on that and help everybody in the organization see that, you'll get more change within that organization. Okay, that's pretty much what I wanted to share.
So, I think it's great, Damon. I think it's great, and I appreciate you picked up on and went a little bit further with my metaphor. So I really appreciate that. But I think that's part of the power of the metaphor itself. Andy Cartwright had our first comment saying that he loves the metaphor of inventory. I just found it so powerful when we start looking at it that way, because then there's so many things that we'll ask ourselves questions of why do we have so much inventory? I mean, you talk about finding the big things and focusing on those big things. And I think that's such a key. What is always curious to me, Damon, is why don't we? Do you have a hypothesis on why we don't do that? Because we seem to want to do too many things. We seem to want to take a long time doing them. I mean, this is kind of our default as human beings. Do you have a hypothesis on that?
Yeah, I would say it's more than a hypothesis at this point. That's why I'm focusing on people and profits now. Is that if you ask, and you could think of it yourself, the team you're on with the best results ever, how many teams have you been on since then that were similar? And generally, excuse me, generally the answer is 0 to 5. Across a person's whole life, the number of teams that they've been on that were like that team with the best results ever is 0 to 5. It's a very small number.
Yeah, and I'm wondering for some of our younger folks if they've ever been on one, right? I mean, do you think that this agile thing? We don't want to keep using that word, but for
that's okay.
Shorthand has been on for a while, and there's a little bit of backlash for it, and I understand what you're saying too, because agility is more important than agile, and I think there's a lot of people out there who unfortunately are confusing the two. But do you think it's getting better? Do you think it's better for our young people that they're gonna over their lifetime have more good teams that they work with? Is it the same?
At the moment, I would say we've hit a glass ceiling. I think personally, I love Agile. I don't think there's anything wrong structurally with Agile, but I think it has hit it's hit a glass ceiling, and it's plateaued unless something changes. Where we are now is where we're going to be.
What would you attribute to that plateau? Do you have some thinking on that?
It's exactly the same as your question. Why are people working on too many things? I don't think that, for me, before I came to Agile, I didn't understand the thing about the team with the best results ever. I wasn't focused on the things in that PowerPoint slide. I wasn't focused on seeing whether or not people were happy. I wasn't focused on seeing whether or not people, were fully enabled to do, to provide the most value that they could. I was just focused on, we have these tasks, we need to get them done by this date. That's what I was focused on.
Right.
And that doesn't work.
Right.
You ask anybody, what was it like on a team with their best results ever? And they're not going to describe a traditional workflow. They're not. They're not going to describe silos. They're going to describe what sounds a hell of a lot like an Agile team.
Right. Yeah. And I think if you had the right environment, so I'm going to throw this out here and get your thoughts on it. If you had the right environment, if you created the right incentives, if you created the right environment, regardless of whether you call it Agile, Scrum, Lean, Kanban, you're going to get something like that. Do you agree? Is it if you make the right environment that you're going to get that, put the right incentives in?
Yeah. Well, we've known that for a long time. The question is why didn't the stuff that we know take off 20 years ago? Right. As soon as it's like the iPhone. 5 years after introduction, smartphones were in billions of people's hands.
Yep.
Because it was obvious. But we're struggling against thousands of years of civilization that said that hierarchical work, micromanagement, tell people what to do, have the person that's the expert manage everybody else. That's what we know. It takes a while to get out of that. Yeah. The other thing I think is most people have not had an MBA, right? And you mentioned MBA. Most people, don't have an MBA. I don't have an MBA either, but having been a small business owner, a little bit bigger than a Bottega, you see, I remember one time we had $9,000 in the bank and 20 mouths to feed. Mm-hmm. You can believe we stopped everything except what was going to be required to make payroll, which was finishing a couple of features for a big customer to get that 100K check, and we survived.
Right. Yep.
You can see, people say, oh, well, if you work that way all the time, that would be crazy. No, it was the best way to maximize profits, was to focus on the most important thing. And that's what you should be doing all the time. The thing is, usually businesses don't calculate. They don't calculate how much is this going to cost us. They just say, when this is done, it will make us this amount of money. But what if you were delivering pieces of it, as you went and focusing on the highest value thing, and you were competing across the entire company with all initiatives? Mm-hmm. One example, somebody brought me in and they said, "Hey, Damon, we're thinking of engaging, your organization, but can you tell us some of the pitfalls that we might run into with Agile and how we might avoid them? So that we don't have to pay money for you."
Yeah.
And I said, well, it was the leadership team. And I said, how many initiatives do you have in flight at the moment? And they huddled and they said, oh, about 120. I said, oh, okay. Hey, imagine what would be the smallest number of initiatives you could have? And don't worry about, if it makes sense in it. What's the smallest number of initiatives you could have? And still everybody's busy. I hate that word, but everybody's busy. What's the smallest number? And they huddled and they said 30. Mm-hmm. And I said, aha. So the pitfall is not moving towards 30. And the difficulty is, which one of you wants to go and tell all those people that have initiatives, the other 90 initiatives paused, that they're going to be paused? And they were like, oh, I see.
Well, yeah, that's a good example. I wanted to run one through you too, because I think it's part of incentives and environment, which was my question before. one of my recent jobs, we changed from project scope-based funding or initiative-based funding to product capacity funding. And that does wonders for reducing the amount of things that you're trying to put through in your inventory. At the time, it was and I still think it is, the largest and fastest initiative of that kind to move from project scope funding to product-based funding, product capacity funding. Anyway, Damon, I could talk about it all day. It's been a pleasure. It goes by so fast when I'm having fun, because I'm looking at the time. It's 12:45, and we promised our audience that we'd try to wrap it up around 12:45. But I want to give you a last word. Any bit of advice for the people who are here live, but for also the people who are going to join us, and there's tons of people, probably thousands of people who join us from this recording in the future. What advice would you give them with regards to your big idea?
Well, I would go back to that slide that I had with the team with the best results ever, and I would ask them to run it for themselves, run it for their teams, run it for their leadership. I think that would be the best place to start. It's a super eye-opening thing. It only takes a few minutes. The caution, though, is do not run it with a leadership team that does not want to have their eyes opened. It might not go well for you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So when they look at what they know as the team they were on with the best results ever, and they compare it with their current teams, yeah, it's very eye-opening. I always thought, I always think, well, now I've learned something and I can make a better environment. But some people just they'd rather, it's like the guy in the Matrix that said, "Put me back in."
Yeah, put me back in. Yeah. Well, that's a great metaphor as well, and a good one to end on, Damon. I certainly appreciate the time. I've been looking forward to having this and kicking off 2024.